The scene crackles with the kind of tension only families can create. At a bustling steakhouse, the clatter of silverware and bursts of laughter blur into background noise as Dad slides a set of keys toward Danny. His jokes ring out like applause, each one echoing off the walls. Meanwhile, the scent of grilled meat lingers in the air, but my appetite shrivels into nothingness. Why didn't my late nights and fellowships count? Why do some victories earn choruses of cheers, while others fade into cold silence? My fingers tighten around the utility statement in my pocket, a paper weightier than any diploma. In that moment, love feels less like unconditional support and more like a transactional bargain. Ever felt that burning ache of invisibility, like your existence is just a footnote in someone else's story? I'm Layla Monroe, 24. And I always believed family was supposed to mean unconditional love. That notion shattered at Danny's family celebration. Years of being overlooked crashed down on me when Dad proudly slid Danny the keys to a used SUV for barely scraping through community college. Then he turned to me, cold eyes fixed, and handed over a utilities statement. My perfect GPA and every late-night study session had earned me nothing but more expectations. That night changed everything. Growing up as the older sister to Danny, who's 6 years younger, felt like living in two different worlds under one roof. My parents treated us like polar opposites. While Danny's C grades earned ice cream and praise from Dad, my straight A's got nothing but, "That's what we expect from you." This pattern didn't just impact us. It spiraled through our childhoods and teenage years. I graduated community college as valedictorian, snagged a full fellowship to State University, and juggling a part-time job, my 4.0 wasn't just a number, it was proof that I worked harder. Yet, when I graduated 3 years ago, my celebration was a small dinner at home. My gift? A coffee mug that read, "The real world starts now." Meanwhile, Danny barely pushed through community college, surviving on C's and D's, just scraping by to graduate. After college, I moved back home, expecting it to be a strategic pit stop while I saved for grad school in psychology. I landed a decent job as an intake coordinator at a mental health clinic, but the pay was barely enough to cover my share of rent in our pricey city. That plan felt more like a lifeline than a step forward. And here I was, lost in family dynamics, still fighting to carve out my own path. My dad, a successful contractor who built his business from scratch, always had a special bond with Danny Brooks. They shared interests in sports and cars, while I took after my mother's more intellectual side. But even my mother, Laura, a kindergarten teacher, seemed to enable the favoritism rather than challenge it. When I would point out the discrepancies in how we were treated, she would say things like, "Your dad shows love differently to different people," or "Danny Brooks needs more encouragement than you do." I tried countless times to address the unfair treatment. Once, after my promotion at work went unacknowledged, while Danny Brooks's first part-time job at the mall warranted a celebratory dinner, I calmly asked my parents if they realized the difference in how they responded to our achievements. "You're comparing apples and oranges, Audrey." My dad had said, "You've always been self-sufficient. Danny Brooks needs more support to find his way." My relationship with Danny Brooks himself was complicated. He wasn't malicious about the favoritism. In fact, he seemed largely oblivious to it. He looked up to me, often asking for help with schoolwork or advice about life decisions. I never resented him personally for how our parents treated us differently. If anything, I worried that the constant coddling would leave him unprepared for adulthood. Throughout my early 20s, I held on to hope that things would change once I had proven myself in the professional world. I thought my dad might finally see me as the competent, successful adult I had become. Each small achievement at work, each dollar saved toward my future, was mentally cataloged as evidence that would eventually win his approval. The incidents leading up to graduation day painted a clear picture I was trying hard not to see. 3 months ago, when I received a substantial performance bonus at work, I excitedly shared the news at dinner. My dad nodded and immediately turned to Danny Brooks to ask about his baseball game. When Danny Brooks got accepted to community college despite his mediocre grades, my parents took him out to a steakhouse and invited the extended family. When I was accepted to all 5 graduate programs I applied to in high school, my mother baked a cake, but my dad was too busy to join the celebration. Last Christmas, my dad gave Danny Brooks an expensive gaming system to reward his improvement in English class from a D to a C-. My gift was a planner for the upcoming year with a note that said, "To help you organize your goals." The disparity was so obvious that even my Aunt Meredith raised an eyebrow. "Your dad has always struggled to connect with people who don't think like him," Aunt Meredith told me privately. "It's not about love, it's about understanding." But her words, while well-intentioned, didn't lessen the sting of years of emotional neglect. Despite all this, I maintained a close relationship with my family. I contributed to household expenses voluntarily, did more than my share of chores, and made myself available to help Danny Brooks with college applications and fellowship essays. I told myself that family is complicated, that my parents showed love in different ways, and that eventually my dad would see me for who I was. Graduation day was when all those carefully constructed rationalizations finally collapsed. Danny Brooks's community college graduation fell on a bright Saturday in June. I had requested the day off work weeks in advance, even though it meant giving up a crucial training opportunity that could have led to another promotion. "Family comes first," I told my supervisor, believing it despite the evidence to the contrary. The morning of graduation, I woke up early to help my mother prepare for the celebration dinner planned for that evening. We were expecting grandparents, aunts, uncles, and a few family friends to join us in celebrating Danny Brooks's achievement. I spent 3 hours cleaning the house while my mother prepared her famous pot roast and apple pie. The memory hit as Layla polished the silverware, the scent of lemon cleaner mixed with a déjà vu ache from her last birthday, her parents bustling around, laughter echoing down the hall, gifts piled high for Danny Brooks, but none for her. The clink of dishes and her mother's voice wrapped around her like a chill, settling deep behind Layla's ribs. No matter how hard she tried, she always felt invisible, like a shadow in her own home. "Your Danny Brooks is so excited," her mother said, stirring a pot in the kitchen. "He's been talking about nothing else for weeks." "I'm happy for him," Layla replied, forcing a smile. She meant it. Despite everything, she wanted Danny to feel special on his big day. She had spent nearly $100, big money from her tight budget, on a leather-bound journal with his initials embossed on the cover and a gift card to his favorite bookstore. Danny had recently discovered a passion for writing, and Layla wanted to fan that flame. As they prepared the house, she overheard her parents whispering in their bedroom. "Do you think he suspects anything about the surprise?" her mother asked. "Not a clue," her dad replied, excitement lacing his voice. "The look on his face is going to be priceless." A familiar pang twisted in Layla's chest. Happiness for Danny mixed with a deep, persistent hurt. Her own achievements had never warranted such secrecy and excitement. Just last month, she'd been accepted into a prestigious graduate program with a partial fellowship, and her dad's response had been, "Make sure that's a practical career path before you commit." Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend, Jennifer. "Good luck today. Remember what we talked about. Stand your ground if things get weird. Love you." Jennifer had seen the family dynamic up close and had been pushing Layla to set firmer boundaries for years. Layla texted back a quick thanks, then returned to her cleaning duties, heart heavy with the weight of unspoken words. By early afternoon, it was time to leave for the graduation ceremony. Danny emerged from his room, looking surprisingly mature in his cap and gown, though his tie was askew. Without being asked, Layla stepped forward to straighten it. "Nervous?" she asked. "A little," he admitted. "Did you feel this way at your graduation?" "Everyone does," she assured him. "Just enjoy the moment. You earned it." But as they drove to the ceremony, Layla couldn't shake the feeling that her own moment was still waiting in the wings, overshadowed by the spotlight on her Danny Brooks. Would she ever step into her own light? The sticky heat inside the stadium pressed against Layla Monroe's skin. The distant smell of popcorn mingled with cheap perfume, creating a strange cocktail of nostalgia and anxiety. Applause thundered around her, but all she could hear was the rhythmic click of her dad's watch, opening and shutting like a metronome, indifferent to the moment. Each snap sank deeper into her chest, sharp enough to drown out the sound of her name echoing off the rafters. In that instant, she swallowed the bitter taste of being background noise at her own success. Despite knowing her Danny Brooks' path had been easier, she forced a smile. Today was his day. The ceremony unfolded with the usual speeches and the calling of names. Layla sat between her mom, who sniffled proudly, and her dad, who seemed unusually animated. When Danny's name was called, her dad whooped so loudly that heads turned. Layla clapped enthusiastically, pushing down the memory of her own graduation, where her dad had checked his watch repeatedly. "Our boy did it," he said, voice thick with emotion. But Layla bit her tongue, remembering how Danny had barely scraped by, while she had graduated summa cum laude from a top university. Today wasn't about her, and it never was. After the ceremony, they gathered outside for photos. Layla volunteered to take most of them, stepping in only when an aunt insisted on one with both siblings. As they posed, Danny's arm around her shoulders, she noticed how her dad angled his body slightly away from her. His proud smile dimmed just a fraction when she entered the frame. On the drive home, her mom turned to her. "Did you see the Johnsons at the ceremony? Their daughter Sarah is going to the same graduate school as you. Isn't that nice?" "That's great," Layla replied, surprised her mom remembered. But her dad interjected. "Maybe you two can carpool, save on gas money. That program's going to cost a pretty penny." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken expectations. Layla felt the familiar pang of being undervalued, her achievements overshadowed by her Danny Brooks's moment. Would she ever step into her own light? And just like that, my fleeting moment of recognition morphed into another reminder. I was seen as a financial calculation, not a source of pride. Back at home, I set the dining room table with our best china, arranging flowers in the centerpiece. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of my dad, deep in conversation with my uncle, gesturing excitedly toward the garage. What was hidden behind that closed door? My stomach tightened with an unsettling dread. Today felt different, like we were on the brink of something I couldn't quite grasp. I pushed the feeling aside, focusing on making the evening special for Danny. After all, that's what good sisters do. By 7, our house buzzed with warmth and laughter, the aroma of my mom's cooking filling the air. The dining room table stretched to its full length, accommodating grandparents, aunts, uncles, family friends, and even Danny's godparents who flew in from Arizona just for this. I wore a navy blue dress I snagged on sale, taking extra care with my hair and makeup. Part of me, the part that still craved my dad's approval, hoped that looking put together might finally make him see me as the successful adult I had become. Danny sat at one end of the table, still in his graduation gown, beaming as relatives congratulated him, pressing cards into his hands. My mom flitted around, refilling glasses and bringing out dish after dish. My dad stood proudly by Danny, his hand resting on my Danny Brooks' shoulder, recounting Danny's academic journey to anyone who would listen. "Not everyone gets school," he told my grandmother, his voice thick with pride. But what about me? I had graduated summa cum laude, yet here I was, invisible again. The ache in my chest grew heavier. Would I ever step into my own light? As the evening unfolded, I felt the familiar pang of being overshadowed. The laughter around me felt like a distant echo, a reminder of my own silent struggles. And then, just as I was about to retreat into my thoughts, the door swung open. The garage revealed a surprise, a brand new used SUV for Danny. Gasps filled the room, and my heart sank. My dad's pride radiated. But what about my achievements? Would they ever matter? As the night wore on, I realized I had a choice. I could let this moment define me, or I could rise above it. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my dreams pressing against my chest. I was determined to carve out my own path, to find my own validation. I wouldn't let the shadows of my family's expectations dim my light. Tonight, I would celebrate Danny, but I would also celebrate myself. I was more than just a background character in my own story. I was Layla Monroe, and I was ready to step into the spotlight. But Danny Brooks here persevered, showed real character pushing through when things got tough. I took small sips of my wine and nodded along with the conversation, offering congratulations where appropriate and deflecting the occasional question about my own life with brief, positive responses. Work is great. Thanks for asking. Yes, still planning on graduate school next year? No serious relationship right now. Focusing on my career. Dinner was served and the conversation flowed freely around topics safe from controversy. Danny Brooks's graduation, summer plans, a cousin's recent engagement. I contributed when addressed directly, but otherwise maintained a quiet presence, the role I'd perfected in family gatherings over the years. As dessert was being served, my mother's apple pie with vanilla ice cream, my dad stood and tapped his glass with a spoon. The table gradually fell silent as everyone turned to him expectantly. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate a major milestone in our family. My dad began, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone used to speaking at job sites. Today, our son graduated community college. A round of applause circled the table. Danny Brooks ducked his head, smiling. Now, some kids breeze through school without breaking a sweat, my dad continued, and I felt his eyes flicker briefly to me before returning to Danny Brooks. And then there are the fighters, the ones who have to earn every grade, who have to push themselves beyond what comes naturally. Those are the ones who really learn what they're made of. More nods of approval around the table. My Uncle Henry raised his glass in Danny Brooks's direction. "Danny Brooks," my dad said, his voice softening with emotion. "Your mother and I couldn't be prouder of the young man you've become. You've shown determination, character, and heart. You've proven that you can overcome challenges and come out stronger, and that deserves recognition." The camera lingers on Layla, her fingers tightening around the untouched napkin in her lap. The family buzzes around Danny, laughter ringing out like a distant echo. Glasses clink, voices blend, but everything blurs, muffling the noise except for Layla's breath. In a sudden cut, her inner voice pierces through the chaos. "But what about me?" The shot shifts to her mother, who discreetly slides a torn envelope toward Layla. Inside, a hidden note reads, "You're next. They just don't see it yet." The feast of validation morphs into Layla's yearning gaze, a stark contrast to the celebration surrounding her. As the evening unfolds, her dad stands, tapping his glass, commanding attention. "Tonight, we celebrate a major milestone," he announces, his voice booming with pride. "Our son graduated community college." Applause erupts, and Danny beams, soaking in the spotlight. "Some kids breeze through school," her dad continues, his eyes flickering to Layla for a brief moment before returning to Danny. "But then there are the fighters, the ones who earn every grade." Nods of approval ripple around the table. "Danny, we couldn't be prouder," he says, his voice softening. "You've shown determination and heart. You deserve this recognition." With a flourish, he pulls out a small box, placing it in front of Danny. "We know you've been saving for a used SUV, working those shifts at the mall. It shows responsibility." Danny's confusion morphs into delight as he opens the box, revealing a key fob with the BMW logo. Gasps fill the air. "No way," Danny whispers, eyes wide. "Way," their dad replies, a rare playful moment. "It's parked in the garage, just like you wanted." Chairs scrape as everyone rushes to the garage, but Layla lingers, a cold weight settling in her stomach. A BMW for a C average? She thinks of her old Honda, bought with hard-earned cash from 3 jobs. Finally, she follows the crowd, hanging back as they marvel at the shiny new used SUV. Danny sits in the driver's seat, joy radiating from him. "This is insane," he exclaims. Layla forces a smile, waiting for the right moment. When the crowd thins, she leans in for a side hug. "Congratulations," she says, her heart a mix of hurt and confusion. But she means it. Danny's excitement is infectious. "You're going to be the coolest kid at community college." Yet, as the night wears on, Layla can't shake the feeling of being invisible, overshadowed by the celebration of someone else's success. She's determined to change that. The note from her mother echoes in her mind. "You're next." And deep down, she knows she will rise. The clatter of dishes drowned out any cheers left in the living room. As Layla stacked plates, her dad watched her in silence, his posture suddenly slack. With a weary exhale, he confessed, "You know, this was always supposed to be your moment." The room seemed to shrink, thick with the scent of fading champagne and the weight of unspoken recognition. Layla froze, sponge in hand, a shimmer of validation flickering in her chest for the first time. The celebration had been all about Danny. The applause, the laughter, the shiny new BMW. Layla had played her part, the supportive sister, but inside she felt like a ghost. As the adults toasted with champagne and the kids sipped sparkling cider, she wore a smile that felt more like a mask. The ache in her cheeks was nothing compared to the hollow feeling in her heart. When the party wound down, she slipped into the kitchen, gathering plates like she always did. It was expected of her. But then her dad walked in, loosening his tie, and the air shifted. "Good party," he said, placing his glass on the counter. "Yeah, it was," she replied, trying to keep her tone light, but his expression turned serious. "Layla, your mother and I have been talking." Her heart raced. "About what?" "You've been living here for almost 2 years now. You're 24. It's time you started contributing properly." Confusion washed over her. "I already buy groceries and paid for the hot water heater repair last month." He waved her words away. "Starting this month, we'll need $900 for rent due by Sunday." Layla blinked, waiting for the punchline. "You're joking, right? After you just bought Danny a $40,000 used SUV for barely graduating." His expression hardened. "That's different. Danny's just starting out. You're an adult now with a job and responsibilities. $900 is below market rate for this area, as you well know." The weight of his words crashed down on her. She felt invisible, overshadowed by her Danny Brooks's success. But deep down, a fire ignited. She was determined to change that narrative. The note from her mother echoed in her mind. "You're next." And she would rise. "I'm saving for graduate school," I said, hearing the slight tremor in my voice. "You know that. That's why I moved back home in the first place." "Plans change," he said with a shrug. $900 by Sunday." He turned to leave, then paused. "And don't mention this to Danny Brooks. No need to dampen his big day with adult concerns." As he walked away, leaving me alone among the dirty dishes, something inside me that had been bending for years finally broke. After the last guest left and Danny Brooks went out to meet friends for a post-graduation celebration, I found my dad in his study reviewing blueprints for an upcoming project. My mother was in the living room flipping through a magazine, but clearly not reading it. Her eyes darting nervously toward the study door as I knocked and entered without waiting for a response. "We need to talk about what you said earlier," I said, my voice steadier than I expected given the hurricane of emotions inside me. My dad looked up, annoyance flashing across his face at the interruption. "There's nothing to discuss. $900 rent due. Sunday. It's more than fair." I took a deep breath. It's not about the amount. It's about the timing and the double standard. You just spent tens of thousands on a luxury used SUV for Danny Brooks as a graduation present. When I graduated, both community college and college with honors, I received token gifts and increased expectations. My dad leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening into the dismissive look I knew all too well. "You're comparing apples and oranges again, Audrey. Danny Brooks needed the encouragement. You never did. So I'm being punished for being self-sufficient, for not needing constant validation and rewards to achieve basic milestones." "Don't be dramatic," he said. "You're being treated like the adult you claim to be. Adults pay their way in life. Then why isn't Danny Brooks being treated like an adult? He's 18 now, old enough to vote, join the military, sign contracts. Why does he get a free ride while I get a bill?" My dad stood up, his patience visibly thinning. "Because that's how we've decided to parent each of you based on your different needs and circumstances." "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "It's because you value him more than me. You always have." The words hung in the air between us, giving voice to the truth that had shaped our family dynamic for as long as I could remember. My dad's expression flickered surprise, then anger, then something like cold assessment. "You want to know why Danny Brooks gets different treatment?" he said finally. "Because he's worth it." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd suspected for years that my dad felt this way, but hearing it stated so baldly, without any attempt to soften the blow or dress it up in rationalizations about different parenting styles, knocked the air from my lungs. "Richard." My mother appeared in the doorway, her face pale. She must have been listening from the living room. "You don't mean that." "I'm just being honest," my dad replied, not taking his eyes off me. "Audrey wants to be treated like an adult. Adults can handle the truth. Danny Brooks has potential if he's given the right support. He could take over the business someday, something Audrey has never shown any interest in. Because you never offered it to me," I said quietly. My dad continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Danny Brooks connects with people, has charisma. He'll go places with the right backing. Audrey's chosen a path that's entirely her own, against our advice. Fine, but that means she's on her own financially too." My mother stepped fully into the room, placing herself between us as if physically blocking the emotional shrapnel flying back and forth. "Richard, stop it. Audrey has always been a wonderful daughter. She's worked so hard, been so responsible, and she's thrown it all away on a dead-end job and plans for a degree that will drown her in debt for what? To listen to strangers' problems all day. What kind of life choice is that?" And there it was, the real issue. Not that I hadn't achieved enough, but that my achievements weren't in directions my dad valued. I hadn't followed in his footsteps or chosen a career path he understood. My independence wasn't a virtue to him. It was a rejection of his authority and values. "My career choice is valid," I said, fighting to keep my voice from shaking. "Mental health counseling helps people. It matters." "So does real work," my dad shot back. "Building things, creating jobs, leaving something concrete behind." My mother placed a hand on his arm. "Richard, please, let's all calm down and discuss this tomorrow when emotions aren't so high." But I was done with the family pattern of avoiding difficult conversations, of smoothing things over until the next incident. "No, Mom, this needs to be said. Dad, I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval. Do you know what it's like to bring home straight A's and have them dismissed as expected? To work multiple jobs through college to avoid asking you for money, only to have Danny Brooks handed everything on a silver platter." "Danny Brooks has different challenges," my dad began, but I cut him off. "Yes, he does, and I love him regardless. This isn't about Danny Brooks. It's about you and how you've made me feel invisible in my own family. Tonight was just the final proof that nothing I ever do will be good enough." From outside came the sound of Danny Brooks's friends dropping him off, used SUV doors slamming, and voices calling goodnight. The confrontation would have to end soon, one way or another. My dad's expression closed like a vault. $900 by Sunday. If that's too difficult for you, perhaps it's time you found your own place to live. The words were delivered with such finality, such dismissal that something inside me simply gave up. Years of hoping for recognition, of making excuses for the discrepancies in how we were treated, of telling myself that family dynamics were complicated. The hallway felt colder with each step, my pulse thrumming in my ears as I climbed toward the dim light of my bedroom. The air still buzzed with Danny's laughter downstairs, but upstairs, something inside me shifted. Final, irreversible. My hand hesitated on the door handle, sweat slick on my palm. Had I really meant it? Was tomorrow the day everything would change? A question burned on the edge of my thoughts, refusing to fade. What if I left for good, and nothing, no one, looked back? All of it collapsed under the weight of those few callous sentences. "You're right," I said, surprising myself with the calm in my voice. "It is time." My mom looked alarmed. "Layla, don't make any hasty decisions. Your dad doesn't mean what he's saying. We can talk about this tomorrow." But looking at my dad's cold expression, I knew with absolute certainty that he meant exactly what he'd said. And for the first time, I saw with perfect clarity that nothing would ever change unless I changed it myself. "I'm going to bed," I said quietly. "It's been a long day." As I turned to leave, my dad called after me. "Remember, $900 by Sunday." I didn't respond. In my heart, I already knew I wouldn't be there on Sunday. Danny burst through the front door then, still riding the high of his graduation day. "Best day ever," he announced, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. I gave him a quick hug as I passed. "I'm glad, Danny. You deserve to be happy." And despite everything, I meant it. My issues were with my parents, not with my Danny Brooks, who had simply accepted the role and privileges he'd been offered. In my bedroom, I sat on the edge of my bed and felt the physical sensation of my heart breaking. Not like the sharp pain I'd imagined, but like something coming untethered, floating free after years of straining against its moorings. There was sadness, yes, but also a strange lightness. For the first time in 24 years, I was seeing my family clearly without the distorting lens of hope and rationalization. I heard my mom's soft knock at the door, but pretended to be asleep. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Tonight, I needed to think. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay awake, replaying my dad's words over and over. 4 simple words that crystallized a lifetime of feeling second best, of achievements dismissed, of love that seemed conditional on conformity to expectations I could never quite grasp. What if I finally chose me? What if I stepped into the unknown, leaving behind the weight of their expectations? The rain outside whispered secrets, and I felt the stirrings of a new beginning. But could I really walk away? Would anyone even notice? Around 3 a.m., my fingers danced over the keyboard, pulling me into a world of numbers I desperately needed to face. My job paid $45,000 a year, which sounded great, but in this unforgiving city, it felt like a drop in the bucket. I'd saved up nearly $20,000 for grad school, living at home and pinching pennies. But now, staring at the screen, I realized that money could be my escape. First and last month's rent, a security deposit, and maybe some basic furniture to breathe new life into my own space. With a deep breath, I shot a text to Jennifer, not expecting a reply this late. "Dad wants $900 rent starting now. Danny Brooks gets a BMW for graduating. I just get a bill. Am I done?" To my shock, her response buzzed back almost instantly. "Holy Audrey, that's beyond messed up. What are you going to do?" "I think I need to move out. Not just eventually, but now." Her reply came like a lifeline. "My couch is yours for as long as you need it. No questions asked." Tears sprang to my eyes. Jennifer had seen the cracks in my family over the years, watching as my dad casually robbed me of my worth while treating my Danny Brooks like royalty. Her offer felt like a warm hug on the coldest night. "Thank you. I might take you up on that." "Seriously, anytime starting tonight if you need it." I set my phone down, the glow from the screen still buzzing in my head as I opened a new tab full of apartment listings. The choices were slim, but there were a few studios within a 30-minute drive that gave me a flicker of hope. By the time dawn crept in, casting a soft light into my room, I finally closed my eyes, but not without the weight of what lay ahead clinging to my chest. I had made my choice, yet a storm of anxiety rumbled in my heart. Would this choice bring freedom or just more heartache? When my alarm pulled me from sleep, I lingered for a few moments, soaking in the sounds of my family. My mom in the kitchen, the coffee maker gurgling like it was pouring life into our mornings, and Danny Brooks's music quietly banging through his door. My dad's heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway, a rhythm that's both comforting and jarring. A wave of homesickness washed over me, a bittersweet craving for the familiar, even with all its messy chaos. Then I remembered my dad's dismissive words, icy and sharp, slicing through that nostalgic feeling. My resolve solidified. At breakfast, I wore my mask of normalcy. "Weekend plans are looking good," I chirped, dodging questions about my work like a pro. Dad didn't even acknowledge our talk from last night. To him, the matter was over and done with. My mom glanced at me, worry written all over her face, but her lips zipped tightly. Then Dad broke the silence, announcing a trip to the dealership to wrap up the paperwork for Danny Brooks's shiny new used SUV. "Laura, are you coming?" he asked my mom, already bubbling with excitement. After a hesitant moment, she glanced at me. "What about you, Audrey? Want to join?" "Hey, I'm wiped from yesterday," I said, forcing a smile that felt like a mask slipping. "I'll just chill here. Catch up on some reading." Dad nodded, not surprised, not caring. Just like that, they were off, leaving me behind. Danny Brooks's disappointment flickered for a second, but his eye was too glued to his new ride to stay in that space. "We'll be back around dinner time," my mom said, squeezing my shoulder. "Maybe we can watch that show you've been raving about." I smiled back, but it felt like a thin veneer over deep cracks. "Sure, Mom." But I knew well it was too little, too late. The minute they left, silence enveloped me. I lingered in the kitchen, absorbing the remnants of what had been my life. I looked at the height chart on the wall, marking Danny Brooks's and my growth over the years. But now, I felt like a ghost in my own home. And just then, as the window caught the morning sun, I stared into my reflection. Only it wasn't me looking back. Suddenly, the scene shifted. We dove into Danny Brooks's mind, sipping his version of the morning. My silence to him was heavy, not ignored, but misread as indifference. The tension twisted, peeling away layers we hadn't seen before. How many misunderstandings lurked beneath our surface? In this family drama, could empathy bridge the chasm? Could we finally learn to see each other? Or were we destined to remain invisible in our own lives? Those questions hung heavy in the air, weighing us down, challenging us to change the narrative. The refrigerator was plastered with family photos and Danny Brooks's sports schedules. The small herb garden on the windowsill, my pride and joy, thrived under my care. There was love in this house, imperfect, unevenly distributed, but real. For a fleeting moment, I questioned if I was overreacting to one bad day, one careless comment. But then, the memories flooded back. All those small moments, the pattern was undeniable. It wouldn't change unless I changed my role in it. With that thought echoing in my mind, I headed to my room. I began the methodical process of deciding what to take and what to leave behind. Clothes? Easy. They'd all fit into 2 large suitcases I'd used for college. Books? Harder. Too many to take all at once. I picked the most meaningful ones, along with a few I was currently reading. My laptop, important documents, and professional clothes? Non-negotiable. As I rummaged through my closet, I stumbled upon a box of childhood keepsakes. Report cards with straight A's, generic praise from teachers, medals from academic competitions, and my valedictorian medal from community college. I had saved them for years, tokens of achievements that had gone largely uncelebrated at home. After a moment's hesitation, I left them behind. The past was the past. I didn't need physical reminders of my quest for approval. As I packed, my bedroom transformed. It became less personal, more like a generic guest room, a physical manifestation of my emotional detachment. There was something cathartic about it. Around noon, I called my supervisor at work. "Elaine, I hate to do this, but I need a few personal days next week. A family situation has come up that requires my immediate attention." Elaine, always supportive of work-life balance, didn't hesitate. "Of course, Audrey. Is everything okay?" "It will be," I replied, surprised by how much I meant it. Then, as I sorted through the box of keepsakes, I found it, a letter, unopened, addressed to me in my mother's handwriting. The date? Years ago. The room, washed in late afternoon light, stilled. My heart raced as I leafed through it. In that moment, I learned a family secret. My achievements had been quietly celebrated, just not in front of me. Jealousy and fear of upsetting Danny had kept them silent. The air felt thicker, my pulse thudding with a mix of betrayal and validation. Everything I thought I knew was reframed. How many times had I felt invisible? How many moments had I been overlooked? The truth hit me like a wave. I wasn't just a ghost in my own home. I was a hero in my own story, ready to reclaim my narrative. I just need some time to sort things out. Take what you need. Your clients can be rescheduled. That task complete. I continued packing, working quickly but thoroughly. By 3, my used SUV was loaded with everything I deemed essential for starting my new life. All that remained was to write the note. I sat at the small desk in my room, pen in hand, staring at the blank paper. What could I possibly say that would make my parents understand my decision without causing irreparable damage? How could I explain to Danny Brooks, who was innocent in all this, why I had to leave? The first draft was too angry, the second too apologetic. The third rambled without making any clear points. Finally, on the fourth attempt, I found the right words. Words that were honest without being cruel, firm without burning bridges. Dear Mom, Dad, and Danny Brooks, I've decided it's time for me to move out and live independently. Last night made it clear that my place in this family isn't what I thought it was or hoped it could be. Dad, you're right that I'm an adult and should pay my own way. So, that's what I'm going to do completely. I won't be paying rent because I won't be living here. I found another place to stay while I look for an apartment. Mom, I know this will upset you and I'm sorry for that. I love you, but I can't keep pretending that the dynamics in this house aren't hurting me. Danny Brooks, this isn't your fault. I'm proud of you and your accomplishments. Enjoy your used SUV and your graduation. This is between me and our parents, not you. I'll be in touch once I'm settled. Love, Audrey. I read it over twice, then folded it and placed it in an envelope with family written on the front. After a final look around my mostly empty room, I carried the note downstairs and placed it prominently on the refrigerator, secured with a magnet shaped like the Eiffel Tower from my mother's collection. Standing in the entryway, keys in hand, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Grief for what could have been, anger at what was, fear of the unknown, but underneath it all, a growing sense of liberation. For the first time in my adult life, I was making a decision based solely on what I needed, not on what others expected of me. Goodbye, I whispered to the empty house. Then I walked out the door, closing it quietly behind me. The first few days at Jennifer's apartment passed in a blur of practical matters and emotional processing. Jennifer had cleared space in her closet for my clothes, inflated an air mattress in her living room, and stocked the fridge with my favorite comfort foods before I arrived. Her unwavering support was a stark contrast to the conditional acceptance I'd grown up with. "Stay as long as you need," she insisted when I expressed concern about imposing. "Seriously, it's nice having you here, like college again, but with better food and fewer all-nighters." My phone began blowing up with notifications the evening I left, around the time my family would have returned home and found my note. Danny Brooks texted first, a series of increasingly panicked messages. "Audrey, where are you? Please come home. Everyone's freaking out. Did something happen? Mom won't stop crying. At least tell me you're safe. I responded only to the last one. I'm safe. Staying with a friend. Need some space right now. We'll explain later. My mother called 14 times that first evening. I let each call go to voicemail, not yet ready to have that conversation. Her messages ranged from tearful pleas to come home to confused questions about what had happened to anger that I would leave without discussing it like an adult. Most revealing were my dad's communications. First, a tour text saying, "This is childish and unnecessary." Then, when I didn't respond, a voicemail stating that my theatrical exit wouldn't change the fact that adults have responsibilities. The rain taps against the window, the scent of earth rising, filling the room as Layla Monroe stares blankly at her screen. An email sits waiting, not just any email, but one she considers deleting. Then her thumb hovers, hesitating as an early thread catches her eye. An accidental forward from her dad. Fueled by curiosity, she opens it. Inside lies a draft, untouched. Words spill out, heavy with guilt, drenched in fear. He's scared. Scared of becoming the same kind of dad his own dad was. Suddenly, her anger wavers. A shard of empathy stabs through the confusion. This is a side of him she never sees. The sterile email transforms. It's no longer just letters on a screen, but a heart laid bare. What does it mean that he feels lost? As she processes his vulnerability, her resolve shakes. She always thought she understood him, an unyielding figure, cold and detached. But now the lines blur. The tension in the room thickens. The weight of truth shifts like the rustle of leaves outside. What had she missed all those years? The unspoken words swirl like autumn leaves in the wind. Did her dad's failures make him blind to her worth? Her heart aches with the realization that they're both lost, trapped in their own roles of misunderstandings. Layla's journey isn't just about escaping a stifling home, it's a path to reclaiming her voice. The tug of family loyalty pulls at her as she reads the email again. She's hurt, yes, but is it enough to build a wall? A journey of self-respect and validation has begun, and she must decide if she can pivot from anger to understanding. Can she bridge this gulf, reshape her narrative, and find a path towards forgiveness, both for her dad and for herself? The air feels charged with possibilities, waiting for her next move. As she leans back, contemplating her choices, the room hums with a new purpose. Layla's story is just beginning, and every word is a step closer to discovering who she really is and what it means to be truly seen. I just need time and space to figure out what kind of relationship I can have with them going forward. After hanging up, it hit me, a rush of unexpected validation. Finally, someone outside my family saw the cracks in our dynamics. Aunt Meredith got it. It eased the self-doubt that always loomed. Was I overreacting? Was I being selfish? By the end of the week, I crafted a new routine. Work filled my days. Apartment hunting consumed my lunch breaks and evenings. Every night, Jennifer and I whipped up dinner together. We'd drift into mindless TV until exhaustion finally pulled me to bed. Then came Friday evening. She insisted I join her for happy hour with friends from her office. "You need a break," she said. No family drama, no apartment stress, just overpriced cocktails and strangers who didn't know my life story. And you know what? She was right. The night was a refreshing escape. I laughed like it was the first time in forever. I even exchanged numbers with Mark, Jennifer's colleague from IT. He had kind eyes and a sarcasm that made the whole evening lighter. The apartment hunt accelerated faster than I'd expected. The third place I checked, a cozy, well-kept studio in a converted Victorian, felt like home the moment I stepped inside. Mrs. Chen, the landlady, was a retired teacher who cared more about community than profit. When I vaguely shared my situation, hoping for some understanding, she nodded knowingly. "Sometimes family makes us realize we need our own space," she said. "The apartment's yours if you want it, Move in next week? Housing secured, a new confidence surged through me. I finally decided to respond to Danny's frantic messages. We set a meeting at a coffee shop halfway between Jennifer's place and our parents' house, a safe zone where we could talk without the pressure of home. Would this be the chance to confront the chaos and misunderstandings? The potential for clarity hung in the air. But could I face what lay ahead? Danny Brooks arrived looking tired and confused, his usual carefree demeanor subdued. He hugged me tightly before sitting down. "Are you coming home?" he asked immediately. "No," I said gently. "I found my own place. I'm moving in next week." His face fell. "But why is it because of my used SUV?" "Because I'll give it back if that's what this is about." "It's not about the used SUV, Danny Brooks." "Not really." I took a deep breath considering how much to share. He was 18, technically an adult, but still my little Danny Brooks who I wanted to protect. It's about how Dad and I interact, about patterns that have been there our whole lives. I need space to be my own person, not just James Monroe's responsible daughter. "But what about me?" Danny Brooks asked, his voice small. "I'm starting community college in the fall. I was counting on you being there to help me with essays and stuff." "I'm not disappearing from your life," I assured him. "We can meet up anytime you want. You can still call or text for help with school. I'm just not living under the same roof anymore." Danny Brooks was quiet for a moment, stirring his untouched coffee. "Dad's really angry," he finally said. "He says you're being selfish and dramatic." "What do you think?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. He shrugged. "I think something big must have happened that no one's telling me about. One day, everything was fine. We were celebrating my graduation. I got my dream used SUV. The next day, you're gone and Mom's crying all the time and Dad's stomping around slamming doors." I hesitated, then decided Danny Brooks deserved some version of the truth. "After you went out with your friends on graduation night, Dad told me I needed to start paying $900 a month in rent. When I pointed out that he had just bought you a luxury used SUV for graduating while I got nothing for my graduations, things got heated. He said some things that made it clear my place in the family isn't what I thought it was." "What things?" Danny Brooks pressed. "It doesn't matter specifically," I said, not wanting to burden him with words that might damage his own relationship with our dad. "What matters is that I realized I need to establish my independence completely. Not just financially, but emotionally too." Danny Brooks processed this, his expression troubled. "Are you okay? Like really okay?" The question touched me deeply. In all the messages and calls from family members, Danny Brooks was the first to ask about my well-being, rather than how my absence was affecting everyone else. "I'm getting there," I said. "Honestly, it's hard and scary, but also kind of exciting. For the first time, I'm making decisions based solely on what I want and need, not on anyone else's expectations." "I can understand that," he said slowly. "Sometimes I feel like my whole life has already been decided for me. Take over Dad's business, marry someone he approves of, have the 2.5 kids and the house in the suburbs. This was news to me. Is that not what you want?" Danny Brooks shrugged again. "I don't know what I want yet. And that's what college is for, right? Figuring it out." "Exactly," I said, smiling at his unexpected wisdom. "And that's all I'm doing too, figuring out who I am outside of our family dynamic." We talked for another hour, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. His plans for the summer, my new apartment, a movie we both wanted to see. When we finally said goodbye, hugging in the parking lot, I felt a new connection with my Danny Brooks, an adult relationship based on mutual respect rather than the protected dynamic we'd had for so long. 2 weeks after leaving home, I moved into my studio apartment. Jennifer helped, as did 2 colleagues from work who owned a pickup truck. By evening, my meager possessions were arranged in the small space, transforming it from anonymous to personal. Sitting on my second-hand couch that night, I felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. This was mine. All mine earned through my own efforts, chosen by my own preferences, arranged according to my own taste. The following week, I received an unexpected email from my old professor and mentor, Dr. Hansen. Audrey, I heard through department channels that you've been accepted to the graduate program. Congratulations. I'm leading a research project on trauma-informed care that has funding for a part-time research assistant. The position comes with partial tuition reimbursement. Would you be interested in discussing it? The timing couldn't have been more perfect. The position would not only provide additional income, but would give me valuable experience in my field and help offset the cost of graduate school. After a successful interview, I accepted the position, which would start in conjunction with the fall semester. As summer progressed, I established new routines and boundaries. I spoke with my mother weekly, conversations that were initially tense and tearful, but gradually evolved into something resembling normal. She never explicitly acknowledged the favoritism or my dad's hurtful words, but there was a new respect in how she treated me, as if my independence had forced her to see me as an adult in a way living at home had not. My dad was a different story. After his initial angry messages, he retreated into stony silence. It was Danny Brooks who informed me that he had forbidden anyone to mention my name at dinner, a childish response that only reinforced my decision to leave. I sent him a formal email with my new address for any mail that might arrive for me and received a one-word response. Noted. 6 months after moving out, my life had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. I had started graduate school, excelling in my courses while balancing work and the research position. I had made new friends through classes and professional networking events. I had even gone on several dates with Mark, Jennifer's colleague, though we ultimately decided we worked better as friends. Most importantly, I had developed a new relationship with myself. Without the constant undertow of seeking approval that would never come, I discovered aspects of my personality that had been suppressed. My dry sense of humor, a passion for photography, a preference for spontaneity over rigid planning. I began making decisions based on what brought me joy rather than what would earn validation. One evening in November, as I was preparing dinner in my tiny kitchenette, there was a knock at my door. Assuming it was the downstairs neighbor asking to borrow coffee again, I opened it without checking the peephole. There stood my parents. The sight of my parents standing awkwardly in my doorway sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. My mother looked nervous, clutching her purse with white knuckles. My dad stood slightly behind her, his expression a complex mixture of discomfort and something that might have been regret. "May we come in?" my mother asked. After a moment of tense silence, I hesitated, then stepped aside. "Sure, I was just making dinner." They entered cautiously, taking in my small apartment with appraising eyes. I watched my dad note the second-hand furniture, the IKEA bookshelves, the lack of a dining table. My mother's gaze lingered on the framed photos on my wall. Pictures of me with Jennifer and other friends at work events, hiking in nearby state parks. A life they knew nothing about. "It's cozy," my mother offered, clearly searching for something positive to say. "It suits me," I replied, turning off the stove where my pasta sauce was simmering. "Would you like something to drink?" "I have water, tea, or wine." "Water is fine," my dad said, the first words he'd spoken directly to me in 6 months. I busied myself getting glasses, giving myself time to process their unexpected appearance. As the afternoon light filters through the cramped living room, Layla Monroe feels the weight of silence pressing down. Her dad's words hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. Just when the tension reaches a breaking point, her phone buzzes. A text from Danny Brooks flashes on the screen. "Don't tell them anything, they'll twist it." A chill creeps up Layla's spine. Doubt seeps in, twisting her familiar concern. For the first time, she questions everything. Am I really the outsider, or have I been entrusted with truths my parents will never grasp? Seated across from her parents, Layla's heart races. "Why are you here?" she asks, her voice steady despite the storm inside. Her mom glances at her dad, a silent plea for him to step up. To Layla's surprise, he meets her gaze. "Your Danny Brooks is struggling," he says, his voice thick with concern. "He's thinking about dropping out of college." "What? Why?" Layla's mind races back to their last coffee date, where Danny Brooks was buzzing with excitement about his classes. Her parents exchange looks of disbelief. "You've been seeing Danny?" her mom asks, a hint of accusation in her tone. "He didn't tell you," Layla replies, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "No, he didn't," her dad snaps, tension crackling in the air. "There are a lot of things he doesn't tell us these days." "Richard," her mom warns softly, but he presses on. "He's withdrawn. His grades are slipping. Yesterday, he said he doesn't see the point in school if he's just going to work for me." Layla's heart sinks. The enthusiastic Danny Brooks she knows feels worlds away from this version. "Did something happen? Did you two fight?" Her dad shifts uncomfortably. "Not exactly. But since you left, everything's changed. Danny Brooks questions everything now. Nothing we say seems right." A realization hits Layla like a punch. "He's seeing the family dynamic differently because I'm not there to balance it out." Her mom nods slowly. "Without you taking responsibility, we've had to lean on Danny Brooks more. He's not handling the pressure well." "Everything I ask becomes an argument," her dad adds, bewilderment lacing his voice. "If I offer advice, he says I'm controlling." Layla's mind races. Is this really about Danny Brooks, or is it about the family's expectations? The rain begins to patter against the window, the scent of wet earth filling the room. She feels the weight of their worries, but also the flicker of her own ambitions. Can she find a way to break this cycle? To reclaim her voice in a family that's always overshadowed her? As the conversation unfolds, Layla knows she stands at a crossroads. Will she step into the light, or remain in the shadows of her family's expectations? The answer lies within her, waiting to be discovered. "If I give him space, he says I don't care." Under different circumstances, I might have found some satisfaction in my dad's struggle to parent the child he had always favored. But seeing the genuine concern on both their faces, I felt only sadness for my Danny Brooks's difficulties. "What do you want from me?" I asked directly. "We thought maybe you could talk to him. My mother said he respects you. He might listen if you encouraged him to stick with school." I considered this. I'm happy to talk to Danny Brooks, but I won't pressure him or tell him what to do. If he's questioning his path, that's his right. He needs to figure out what he wants, not what you want for him. My dad's face wrined slightly, but he nodded. "That's fair." An uncomfortable silence fell. There were so many unspoken issues between us, so much history that couldn't be addressed in one conversation. Finally, my mother spoke again. "We've missed you, Audrey. The house isn't the same without you. I've missed aspects of home, too," I admitted. "But I needed this." I gestured around my apartment. I needed to know I could stand on my own. "You've always been able to stand on your own," my dad said quietly. "That was never in question. For you, maybe. For me, it was something I had to prove to myself." My dad looked down at his hands, then back up at me with an expression I'd rarely seen on his face. Uncertainty. I said things that night, things I shouldn't have said. It wasn't quite an apology, but coming from James Monroe, it was the closest thing to one I'd ever received. I waited, allowing the silence to stretch, giving him space to continue if he chose to. "Your mother has pointed out that I've been uneven in how I treat you and Danny Brooks." "That's one way of putting it," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Audrey," my mother warned. "No, she's right," my dad said, surprising us both. "I've expected more from you and given you less recognition. It wasn't fair." The night air felt heavy against Layla Monroe's skin, clinging like an unwanted reminder of the chaos she'd just endured. Alone in her quiet apartment, she replayed every word from that awkward family visit, her mind racing between what was said and what lingered unspoken. Just when she thought the night couldn't twist in any more unpredictable ways, Her phone buzzed. A lifeline thrown from her little Danny Brooks. Danny Brooks. What he said took her breath away. He had orchestrated their parents' visit, longing to mend the shattered pieces of their home life. Suddenly, everything flickered into focus. The forced apologies, the cringeworthy silence. It all made sense. Layla realized then just how much Danny's voice had shaped the night, leaving shadows that no one acknowledged. But there was a fire igniting within her. She felt resilient against the unfair treatment she'd endured, keen on carving her own path despite feeling invisible. As she sat with that haunting realization, she thought of her dad, a man stuck in his rigid ways, offering little but disappointment. "You've done well for yourself here," he'd finally said, a gruff sincerity woven into his words. High praise from him, but was it enough? They couldn't merely sweep aside the years of uneven treatment and expectation. The next weekend at their usual coffee shop, Layla confronted Danny about his struggles, sensing a heaviness in his brow. "Mom and Dad came to see you?" he asked, his distress palpable. When she mentioned their concern, and hers, he sighed, frustration etched into his features. "I'm fine, mostly. But community college? Is that really what I want?" The doubt hung in the air like a storm cloud. "What are you thinking?" she ventured softly, hoping to coax his truth. "I don't know. Maybe traveling a bit, trying different jobs, to figure out what I enjoy." Danny's eyes flickered with uncertainty. Layla smiled at him, an encouraging warmth spreading through her. "That's not crazy at all. So many people do that before they settle on a career. Just talk to Dad about it." "Easier said than done," he retorted, his voice tinged with reality. Their dad's rigid visions strangling any inkling of creativity. And in that moment, Layla felt a shift. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about rebuilding, understanding, lifting each other up from the chasms of expectation. They were both more than a family torn apart. They were allies ready to reclaim their lives. Layla Monroe sits in her childhood bedroom, tracing patterns in the worn carpet. The scent of rain filters through the cracked window as conversations with Danny Brooks echo off the pale, faded walls. "You've done well for yourself here," her dad, James Monroe, finally says. But those words feel hollow. The quiet suffocates her. The camera lingers on Danny's face, a mix of confusion and frustration spreading across it. Then it drifts toward a manila envelope tucked away in a desk drawer, long forgotten. The tension thickens, and the story shifts. Danny opens that envelope in secret, curiosity piquing. His eyes widen as he discovers a letter from Layla, addressed to their dad, begging for validation that never came. In that moment, it's all too clear. Layla's struggle was never just hers. How many times has she felt invisible, trapped beneath the weight of family expectations? The air feels heavy as the realization lands. Why didn't I know about this? Danny's voice is a whisper, echoing with regret. Layla has spent months learning to be brave, to carve her own path in a world that said she didn't matter. "You have to live for yourself," she once told him, her own reflection shimmering with resilience. Danny's own journey begins to unfold. As he shares his insecurities about living up to their dad's rigid plans, she offers support, an open heart. "Just be honest with him," she encourages. "You get to choose your own future." A few months later, we witness an undeniable shift in their once fractured family dynamic. Danny sits across from their dad, a newfound confidence shining in his eyes. After the initial resistance, a compromise emerges. A year for Danny to explore before making decisions that could shape his identity. Layla's bond with their mom strengthens, too. Shared laughter fills their lunch breaks, blossoming into new memories. Resilience ripples through Layla's veins, not just for herself, but for Danny, for this family learning to rise together. Could it be that every tear shed and every unspoken word finally leads them to this moment of healing and hope? Conversations that ranged from casual catching up to deeper discussions about family dynamics and her own experiences as a young woman. "I should have stood up for you more," she admitted during one such lunch. "I knew Richard favored Danny Brooks, but I told myself it was because you were so self-sufficient that you didn't need the same kind of support." "Why did you stay with him?" I asked. A question I'd wondered about for years. "You must have seen how he treated you sometimes, not just me." She considered this thoughtfully. "I loved him. Still do despite his flaws. And there were good times too. Moments you probably didn't see. Plus, divorce wasn't something women of my generation did lightly." She smiled sadly. "But if I'm being completely honest, part of it was fear of starting over alone." "You're braver than I ever was, Audrey. My relationship with my dad remained the most complicated. Old patterns don't disappear overnight, and he struggled to relate to me as an independent adult rather than the beautiful daughter he had expected me to remain. But there were small changes. He made an effort to ask about my graduate studies, sent an awkwardly formal email congratulating me when I was published as a co-author on Dr. Hansen's research paper, and stopped making dismissive comments about my career choice. A year after I had left home, I hosted a small dinner party in my apartment, which I had recently upgraded to a one-bedroom in the same building. My parents and Danny Brooks were among the guests, along with Jennifer, my Aunt Meredith, and a few close friends from work and school. Watching my dad engage in polite conversation with my professor about the practical applications of psychological research. Seeing my mother help serve dessert in my tiny kitchen. Observing Danny Brooks deepen conversation with my friend Marcus about travel opportunities abroad. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't expected to achieve so soon. The power dynamic in our family had fundamentally shifted. Layla Monroe's hand tightens around her chipped coffee mug, steam curling upward, carrying the bittersweet scent of a burnt morning. A memory pulls her under. She's 12 again, sitting at the kitchen table. Sunlight streams through the blinds, illuminating her mother fussing over Danny Brooks' science fair ribbons. Meanwhile, her own report card sits unnoticed, edges curling. The ache in her chest then echoes now, sharp as her dad's dismissive voice cutting through her quiet accomplishments. That longing, warm yet painful, still flickers beneath her grown resolve. Fast forward to today, Layla's navigating the chaos of family expectations and the weight of feeling invisible. She's determined to carve out her own path, to gain the self-respect she's always craved. But how do you break free from the chains of your past? As she builds her career in mental health counseling, Layla reflects on her journey. Each session with clients reveals the complexities of family dynamics, the courage it takes to break unhealthy patterns. Her relationship with Nathan, a kind and supportive fellow grad student, shows her what true partnership looks like, a stark contrast to the imbalanced relationships she witnessed growing up. Danny eventually chooses his own path, focusing on sustainable entrepreneurship instead of construction. At first, their dad resists, but he learns that holding too tightly often leads to losing connection altogether. The journey isn't always smooth. There are still difficult conversations, moments of slipping back into old patterns, and times when boundaries need to be reasserted. Yet, with each holiday navigated and each disagreement resolved respectfully, they build a new family dynamic, one rooted in mutual respect rather than prescribed roles. Looking back on that pivotal night when her dad demanded rent while gifting Danny a luxury used SUV, Layla realizes that what felt like the worst moment of her life was actually the catalyst for necessary change. Without that breaking point, she might have remained the good daughter, forever seeking approval that would never come, sacrificing her own needs for a false sense of family harmony. Now, she stands tall, ready to embrace her worth and create her own success. The past may have shaped her, but it no longer defines her. Layla Monroe is here to reclaim her story. The most profound lesson I learned through it all was that true self-worth comes not from external validation from parents or anyone else, but from honoring your own values and boundaries. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and ultimately for your relationships, is to walk away from situations that diminish you, even when those situations involve the people who are supposed to love you most. As I helped Danny Brooks move into his own apartment near campus the following year, a modest place he was paying for primarily himself through a part-time job and scholarships, he thanked me for showing him it was possible to forge his own path. "If you hadn't left that night, I don't think I ever would have questioned anything," he said as we assembled a bookshelf together. "You changed everything, not just for yourself, but for all of us." His words stayed with me, a reminder that our actions can have ripple effects beyond what we initially imagine. By choosing myself in that moment of crisis, I had not only changed my own life, but had created space for others to change as well. Sometimes walking away isn't an ending, but the first step toward building something better, something true, something healthy, something that can genuinely last. And sometimes the note you leave behind opens the door to conversations that should have happened years ago. Have you ever had to walk away from a situation to preserve your self-respect? What difficult family dynamics have you navigated in your own life? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message, please share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's sometimes the most necessary act of self-preservation.